meeting is beginning.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the San Francisco Psychedelic Society. My name is Danielle Negrin. I'm the executive director, and this is
Seth Warner.
Dhamma. So welcome to the last community meeting of our series with Chacruna Institute for Psychedelic Plant Medicines. We've been doing this series for about 5 months throughout the year, and we're really excited for this event. This is, as you all know, this is the Oakland premiere of the Peyote Files screening, the first ever screening in the city of Oakland. So we have an exciting evening planned for you. We have some speakers that have come from far away, from out of town. We have Dr. Martin Terry and Don Davis and Bia Labate, who are going to be speaking after the film, after we debuted the premiere. A big thank you to the Haven. Right now we're in the Haven. It's a new building. This is where the Decriminalized Nature headquarters, this is where all the Decriminalized Nature initiative was founded and started, and the work was built and birthed out of here. We decriminalized entheogenic plants and fungi in the city of Oakland on June 4th. So. This is where the magic happened. And one thing we love about having events here at the Haven is it's super accessible, and Carlos is really easy and fun to work with. So I encourage everyone to utilize this awesome event space. And there's a co-working space that's just opened up here, so come and co-work here. And there's office space available. A couple psychedelic organizations are moving in, so we're really excited to have this new psychedelic space. A quick update from the San Francisco Psychedelic Society. We have just incorporated our nonprofit. We are official now and going legit. And we're on our way to 501c3 status. So Andrew is here. I'm not sure if he's in the room right now, but Andrew Hammond is here. He's our new board of directors chair, and we're really excited to take this next step. And connect with us after if you're interested in. There's Andrew. Welcome, Andrew.
Welcome, thank you for supporting us.
Nice shirt, dude.
And Sarah's back there, and she is running all the social media, so we're so grateful for Sarah. We're going to keep this quick, and Dama's going to hop on the mic to introduce our partners, and then Seth's going to do a prayer.
Hello. I just want to invite all of you for a second to come back to our breathing, and if you feel comfortable standing up, just for 10 seconds, really quick shaking. If you have food, you can put it on the floor. So if you cannot stand up, just taking a deep breath, and you can close your eyes, and this really feels like a family and coming back home. Inhale and really full out breath and exhale. Breathe into any emotional tension, physical tension that you might be holding on, and exhale with the full out breath. And you can do a little shaking, a little qigong, and to vibrate our body and come back to that life energy, the qi. And on your own time, come back to the stop and move back to our chairs, and still interacting with the space and our breathing, and slowly coming back to the place. Now quickly introduce Ryan. He's one of my really close friends. He's doing a great job at Urban Eden East. You can have some really cool vegan cacao, rose petal nips, and quinoa. And then we have Huichol Center, Angelica. I could see she's there. They were nominated for Nobel Prize in 2019, and she's doing all the beautiful jewelry and art. It's right behind the door. And for some housing rules, if you need the bathroom, it's the end of this hallway to the left, and there's one more in the way you enter to the left. And if you want to buy some raffle tickets, we'll still have it going on till the end of the night. That's also where you checked in. Am I missing anything? Okay. And Seth is going to share a prayer and talk about ceremony.
Thanks for the intro, guys. Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time, but one of the big things that we've all agreed on as we move forward to a nonprofit and into our status is we want to bring more of a sense of ceremony into our events. We really want to figure out what that means. We're all new to the space, and it's a journey. And so I have a book here called Braiding Sweetgrass that I took a little bit of wisdom out of, and I encourage anybody to read it. It's really beautiful. But just a little bit of the what and why in ceremony. So it's really quick. Ceremony is a vehicle for belonging to a family, to a people, and to the land. The power of ceremony. It marries the mundane to the sacred. The water turns to wine, the coffee to a prayer. The material and the spiritual mingle like grounds mingled with humus, transformed like steam rising from a mug into the morning mist. What else can you offer the earth, which has everything? What else can you give but something of yourself? A homemade ceremony, a ceremony that makes a home. So thank you guys, and I think we're going to get into the meat of the evening, the Peyote Files. Thank you so much, Bia, and shall we?
Thanks, Seth. Thank you all so much for being here, for taking the chance to come learn about peyote with us. Without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce Bia Labate. The Peyote Files is a documentary web series following anthropologist Dr. Bia Labate in search for the elusive peyote cactus in West Texas, built around the frank exchanges between Bia and the cactus expert and conservationalist, Dr. Martin Terry. This 3-part series offers an eye-opening insight into Martin's pioneering work to understand the threats faced by peyote and the urgent action needed to ensure its survival. And Bia will dive deeper into what this film is going to be all about, and we'll get into it. So welcome, Bia.
Hello, everybody. I'm not going to speak much. I just want to say that I lived 5 years in Mexico, and first I lived in the semi-desert in the city of Aguascalientes, and I was not adapting there very well. The climate was very rough. I had some skin disease, but mainly I felt a little bit alienated. It was very conservative and very patriarchal, and I tried to convince my university to study peyote, and my boss said to me, "Bia, little Miss Peyote is not going to work over here." Which was really making it a childish thing, like a feminine reducing thing, and like a minor thing, like who cares for indigenous people or peyote. And so I developed this hobby on the side, and parallel I started to cultivate a peyote cactus garden in my house. So I was not having a lot of friends, and I was gaining weight and feeling lonely and bored. And I found love in the cactus. I found tenderness in those creatures. And I felt, I created this garden, and I created this love to this garden, and then that was just a cactus garden, and then that led me naturally to peyote, and I had already been researching ayahuasca and drinking ayahuasca for a lifetime, so that was a kind of natural jump. And so I went eating peyote on the desert, and then I started to communicate with this gentleman, like back in the day when we had not PayPal, pen pal buddies that you wrote letters to. So I started to write letters to this man called Martin Terry about life and existence, and my love for peyote, to which he reciprocated. And we exchanged letters for years, and they invited me to come every year to California to this exotic cactus loving gathering on some Northern California farm with all these cactus nerds that, you'd say good morning and they would look at your t-shirt and you had like a cactus on your t-shirt and it's, well, that species, blah, 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 and talk hours and hours about that species. So a lot of new vocabulary for me. And through this friendship, I developed developed this love and this respect, and I just found him a real gentleman and a real elegant man, and I was very touched by the fact that not only he has 2 PhDs, but he's a gardener and a caretaker and a singer and a husband and a father and a friend and a mentor and a mensch. And so it's a tribute to Martin, and it's very modest. I don't aim to go to Ken, and I'm not an artist, but it's a attempt to tell the story of this man and his love for this plant, and also that has to do with the love story of him and Adrian, but I won't go into all of that, but it's a love for people and plants and for our relations to the plants. And he's the only person in the United States that has a license from the DEA to study peyote. So that's kind of a curriculum, agree? And peyote is endangered, and there's very little out there. So that revolts me as a foreigner. I'm like, this powerful country with millions of dollars, what's going on? Where is this money? Where is this philanthropes? Why aren't nobody cares for peyote or indigenous people? This is wrong. And so this is my modest contribution to this state of affairs. And I haven't included native voices in this piece, which breaks my heart, but that was entirely self-funded. And it was just, an experiment to tell the story of a person who cares, well, because Martin teaches for us to harvest peyote, and so one time I asked him, how do you feel about a person? So he will walk in the fields and find a little pup. He gets the pup, he puts it in his hat, carries it, brings home, plant it, talk to it, care for it for years, for dozens and dozens of plants. And I say, how do you feel when you see somebody harvesting peyote in a sloppy way, going with a big, instrument? And he says, I don't feel good. I said, what else do you feel? I feel he doesn't care. Yeah, and how does that make me feel? How does that make you feel? Well, it puts distance between us, because I care. So I care too. I hope we all care, and let's enjoy the film. Just want to also show our, so besides the cactus garden, I also did a book. This is called Peyote History, Tradition, Politics, and Conservation. And I'm going to circulate it around. It's took us like almost 4 years to put together. And this is the cover of the book by my lovely wife, Clancy Kavner. And I invite Dawn and Martin to sit up here, and I would like you to introduce yourselves. And I think the way that we're going to do this is each one make a comment about the film or whatever you want. Tell a little who you are, and then we're going to have questions and answers. Let's start with Dawn.
No, let's start with Dawn. Can everyone in the back see? Yep. No, move in here.
I'll stand up so you in the back can see me, if you want to. Thank you. The one thing that I would like you to take away from this meeting tonight, and by the way, congratulations to all of you on the DNO. Fabulous. I'd like you to think about what we can do in the near future and the long-term future to minimize either minimize the harvesting, which is highly unlikely, or better still, maximize the production of replacement plants, so that literally every time you take one for spiritual use, you put back 2 little ones to replace it. And then you don't touch those 2 little ones for about 8 years. That's what I would like to see happen on the part of people, like most of the people in this room, who would like to see peyote thrive and be abundant and be available then for spiritual use. That's my message for you tonight.
Hello everybody, so my name is Dawn D. Davis, and probably wondering why I'm here because I'm not in the film. I call myself a Nua. I belong to the Shoshone-Bannock tribes of Fort Hill, Idaho, and I refer to myself as an Indigenous peyote researcher. And I have been studying peyote for over 10 years now, and have been looking at the preservation and perpetuation of this plant from the perspective of, and as an Indigenous woman, but also as a person who's used peyote my entire life. My mother shared with me that in utero she ingested peyote just before my birth, so I've had this peyote for a very long time. And I participated in ceremony with my grandmother. I was her peyote partner for a very long time. Still am her peyote partner. And so I'm here in support of the video and in support of Martin's work because this is the first time I've seen Martin in over 10 years. It's probably been about 15 years since the first time I met Martin. So it's been a very enduring time to watch this film. I watched it in pieces as Bia sent me some edits, and it was just amazing to see the perspective of Martin Terry. I've referenced his work for a very long time, and always wondered what his own personal. I knew he was. This plant is endearing to him. It was obvious in his own research, but it was nice to see that piece in this film to show his real, true reverence for this plant, because that's the same position that I have as a woman who uses this plant as part of my spiritual practice. It's important for me that there is care taken in how we use this medicine, and also in how we look at the future of peyote perpetuation, particularly as it is involving decriminalization, as it was considered with the resolution passed here in this very room, to include entheogens. And I think one thing that we all need to be aware of, and Martin also kind of hit on it too, was that wild populations really should not be harvested. They should be absolutely left alone. And that's what I want to end with.
Yeah, so we're going to open for comments. I just want to preface by saying that peyote is a topic that raises a lot of passion. It is one of the most dense and complicated issues because it's different than other psychedelic plant medicines, because it's criminalized and it's endangered, and there's little research about it. So I come from the world of ayahuasca. There's a lot of infighting. Peyote tops it. There's much tension, and it really has broken friendships and things. And I just want to say that everybody's allowed to have their own opinion, and I do really want everybody to say what you think if you have an opinion, and I want us to be able to hold diverse views. Because having different opinions doesn't mean that people have, enemies or conflict. It's important that we have conversations and hard conversations. I myself took risks by doing this film because you can guess, I don't need to explain. Anyway, I want to invite everybody to be sincere and, speak their minds and make your comments. You can make a comment, you don't have to make a question only. So whoever wants to talk, maybe Danielle wants to organize the passing the mic, and I think you could keep it short, be mindful, and say who you are, say your name, maybe one little thing about you, and looking forward to hearing your impressions.
So we can't really pass the mic around. If you could come up for the question, or I could repeat it into the microphone.
I could just also speak really loudly.
It's better because we're filming.
Oh, you really? Oh, God. I just
Hi, I'm Anna. Cameron. Actually, I have two questions. One is, in theory, how do these harvesters put two small cacti back when they've taken one from the landscape? Where do they get those two from? And then the second question would be more along the lines of climate change, expanding territory. Is that something that you all have thought about, or that we can consider in terms of just the climate becoming hotter and drier? That makes more available, the territory can encroach northward, is what I'm saying. Maybe.
Okay, let's tackle that second question first, because it's the difficult one. Well, it's a difficult one. As climate change marches on, assuming that we're not going to be able to do as much about it as we would like to, as fast as we would like to, there's going to be, basically a shrinkage of viable habitat for peyote, but it's not just due to the climate change. It's due to things like clearing vast areas of land of classic Tamaulipan thorn scrub, which is the native habitat of peyote, and particularly in South Texas and adjacent Mexico. As that goes on, that's pretty much irreversible. Because what happens is when people go to clearing land, whether it's for to put up a wind turbine, which it's a great idea, but people are a little too, I'm not sure what drives them, but they always clear a lot more land than they need to put a wind turbine in place. And when that happens, what they actually do is they bring in these enormous tractors with tines that go down 2.5 to 3 feet into the earth, and they pull those tines through the earth, and basically what happens then is every plant, every kind of plant that occurs there, because even the big plants are not taller than this. They're thorn scrub plants. They're acacias. Everything gets uprooted and dirt sort of inverted over what was the native flora. Everything that was there dies. There's just no plant life that can withstand that kind of uprooting, and usually they even will then rake up whatever's left on the surface and burn it. So that land is, you have to think of it as permanently cleared, i.e. permanently not available for peyote. So you have to now to go back to the first question, how do you get these two to put back in place of the one that's been harvested? Okay, it's not hard. Peyote is one of the easiest plants in the world to cultivate, but it just, you have to find the seeds, and that's not a trivial problem unless you know somebody who can help you with that. And it's a real tricky question legally, because there is this little clause in the Texas state legislation, not the federal stuff, and DEA is not to be blamed for this one. It's the Texas legislators who've left this this ancient piece of text, basically left over from the 1960s beginning of the war on drugs. It's that sort of mentality that's reflected here. There's this line in the Texas state legislation that says you will not use seeds and you will not do cultivation. Now, I'm just going to say to you here in this room that I believe there's a way around that, but it's
Here in this room and for our lovely audience that will watch the video.
I think what can be done is if we utilize the right language, we can turn cultivation into research in situ. You see the point? I believe that's totally valid. I believe we'll be backed up certainly by the DEA, which is what we have to get through in order to start doing this. And I think the state people won't have a leg to stand on either. And they'll ultimately follow the DEA. So I think it can be done. The short-term problem is, where do you get seeds, or where do you get very tiny seedlings, juvenile plants that have just come into the world in the last few months? What needs to do is that those little plants need to be put back into their natural habitat, if you can find it, assuming that you can, find some decent habitat. You know why they grow so well in this acacia sort of environment. It's the acacias, they don't have a lot of leaves on them, but they have enough to block a lot of the sunlight, so the little just starting in life BB-sized seedlings don't get too much heat or too much drought. So that the native flora of the Tamaulipan scrub really allows those little babies to survive and eventually to start really growing and get to a size where people would say, oh, that's big enough to harvest. But yeah, getting those original seeds, I really believe that it may be possible to buy those legally from distributors in Europe.
Yeah.
The Czechs raise a lot of peyote legally in their country, so you can buy things from, you can buy seeds from Czechoslovakia. You can even, they sell it from different known localities in Mexico where they collected the seeds to take back to Czechoslovakia to grow them up. There's also Gerhard Kurz in Germany, who has been raising peyote in greenhouses for 6 or 7 decades. He has seeds for sale too. I'm not the one to advise you on how to get them from Germany to the U.S. But yes, that's how I would go about it. It's just you can start the seeds off, on your windowsill, and watch to see. You got to keep them fairly moist when the seeds are just planted, Yeah, but if you water them just enough, don't drown them. Just keep them moist. You will see those seeds begin to germinate in just probably 10 days, 2 weeks max. And then it's a matter of just keeping them watered but not drowned for long enough. I would say let them be marble size before you transplant them. That gives them a much better chance of surviving in a hot, dry place compared to smaller seedlings. And then once you get those young plants, marble-sized plants, back in their habitat, leave them alone. Leave them alone for at least 8 years. If you want them to get to a size A where they themselves are reproducing, naturally, and B where you can again think about, oh, that plant's big enough to harvest for ceremony, but don't harvest them all. Maybe go in and at most, if you have a tract full of peyote, you don't want to harvest more than half. I would leave half of the plants that are already there and already growing nicely and already up to the size that you would see in the bins of the peyote distributors. You want to leave a good percentage of those, and come back in a couple more years and see how they're doing. How many of you are familiar with the significance of rib number in peyote plants? Okay, I don't have a way to if I could just draw a pie here that represents looking down on the peyote plant, you're going to see something round, and if you count the little segments, the little triangular segments that start in the middle and spread out to the perimeter of the plant, then what you're going to see is that the young plants, when you can actually recognize that they have these ribs, as they're called, will have 5. Now, all the young plants, up to about quarter size, and some even bigger, will have 5 ribs. Then there's a quick transition at some point where they grow 3 more ribs in between the initial 5, and you have an 8-rib plant, which may be considerably larger, because those 3 additional slices give greater perimeter to the plant and greater mass going down. Then finally, the old plants, the so-called grandfathers, they're going to have 13. Now that sequence of 5 to 8 to 13 follows the Fibonacci series, for those of you who are mathematical wonks. Okay, 13, it never exceeds 13 in the species that we have. Down in Mexico, there are species that go on to the next Fibonacci number, which is 21 ribs. But unfortunately, we can't grow them here. They're just not native to here. They need a much more tropical environment. What have I missed?
Nothing. That's why some people call him a cactus nerd. So I just want to make a remark for my friends that I'm assuming everybody kinds of rolls in the psychedelic circuits around this area. Isn't it super puzzling and intriguing, or kind of absurd, that we that are in the psychedelic community go to millions of psychedelic events, meetups, podcasts, and salons and conferences, and who's actually talking about the plants? This gap of ethnobotany and science is huge. Like, we talk and talk and talk about the healing potentials of the plants, but who's studying the plants? And what is there is a student of Schultes. And who's there? Who's talking about the ethnobotany of ayahuasca? Ayahuasca, boom! Every week a new celebrity in Hollywood taking ayahuasca. Millions of dollars spread. Clinical trials for everything. Like, who is a reference of an ethnobotanical researcher on ayahuasca in planet Earth today? So this is also an invitation. If you're a young idealist plant lover, what about studying the plants and helping to create conversations and secure space for studying and, dedicating yourself to, protecting the plants, which brings me, I think, to a moment that was very dear in my heart, and I believe it was you sitting on that audience. I forgot your name. So we invited Dawn to come to Psychedelic Science 2017. I found Dawn in that phase that I was in my solitude in Mexico, cultivating my garden and trying to, create a book on peyote on the side of my job, because that was not accepted as part of my job, trying to find everybody that ever studied peyote, and I came across her name, and she had just like one paper, like a midterm paper or something, and I wrote to her, and she was kind, and we started a correspondence, and that resulted in Dawn being invited to speak in psychedelic science. And then there was a researcher, I think it was you, I'm not sure, that in the end of her presentation said, I'm a ecologist, or I don't know if ecologist or biologist, I don't remember, something like that. And I would like to know how I could support you and your research as a Native American woman. And Dawn stopped and she said, I don't know if you remember, interesting question, I will have to think, because this is the first time somebody asked me this. So I thought that was pretty amazing, that these conversations are not having, and we're not having them. And this is also why we create these events. I also wanted to invite Dawn to speak a little bit more about, I just really want you to be sincere and she's staying in my house. It's, you know, all good. We have differences in views sometimes, but we have much more in common than in different. And so I know you feel a little bit like weird about cultivation, and I want you to talk about that if you feel like it.
Putting me on the spot, yeah. So cultivation is, to me, still a very puzzling position, especially as, you know, Martin and Bia had mentioned in the video, that Native American people do have this issue with growing outside of its native habitat, which, you know, there's going to be possibility for, you know, adaptive changes that are going to happen. And also, in talking with the peyote distributor over 10 years ago, they had mentioned that, you know, peyote growing outside of the garden would evolve into something else. And they showed me this cactus that they had on their windowsill. And it did not look, it looked like a peyote, but it also looked like something else. It was this little monstrous little cactus. And they told me that's what peyote will turn into if it is grown outside the habitat. And that stuck with me for a very long time. But then I also realized after, you know, thinking about that for a while, for years, that that was more of a business tactic on their end. Because they're in peyote for business. That's what they do. So any, you know, revenue outside of the gardens is pulling away from their income. Not to say that I don't believe that peyote should be grown in its native habitat, because I do believe that that's where it should be growing. And so a part of the research that I do is looking at peyote spatially and looking at it. So I'm using GIS, which is Geographic Information Systems. So what you guys all use on your Google Maps. That's a GIS program. So I'm using a program like that to help define or to determine what the core range of peyote looks like. And looking at it from previously published maps. So I'm taking a map from, you know, 1974, I think was the first map published on peyote, and then taking maps that Martin Terry has designed in addition to other published maps by other peyote researchers, and trying to define what a core peyote range looks like. And so that can help to determine where conservation efforts can be made in looking at those larger habitats, looking at that larger habitat. Because I do believe that something needs to happen in order for us to protect this plant. And that's why I fully stress that any wild populations or wild populations should be protected, and that no harvesting of wild populations by non-Indigenous people should be happening. Because for one, it's illegal. It's illegal for non-Indigenous people to have peyote. Which is what makes the decriminalization here in Oakland challenging. It makes that very challenging for me as an Indigenous person to know that a non-Indigenous person here in Oakland has more rights to cultivate than me myself, who lives on a reservation. I don't have the rights to cultivate. So for me, that's insulting to know that a non-Indigenous person can grow it here in Oakland and I can't. So I have trouble with that. I have really deep troubles with that. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that.
Question, the restrictions on growing peyote in a tribal area, are those restrictions imposed by the tribe, or are they external?
They're a little bit of both. So in our state, I believe that in the state of Idaho, I believe that if our tribe could do their own policy, I think that there would not be a problem. But it would also have to be state regulated because we have state chapters on our reservation. So there are some state oversight in that, which I don't agree. I don't agree that we should have any state oversight, but we do. And those are the laws that we live under. I was sharing today at lunch that as an Indian person, I fall under 3 forms of government. I fall under the federal government, I fall under the state government, and I fall under tribal government. So I'm under the thumb of a lot of governments. And that's that's the complication of being an Indian person.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. Thank you. Okay. Is this good? Am I? Okay. Thank you, all of you, for your work. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Bia. I'm also a cactus nerd. I cultivate San Pedro at home as a spiritual practice, not even for use. I just like to talk to them and feed them tobacco and be with them. They're beings that are very beautiful. And I would love to be helping to cultivate, maybe not in a greenhouse, but just tending, just honoring. And I'm curious, Don, would you feel differently about what's happening with DNO in Oakland and people potentially cultivating or being with the medicine if the regulations on your reservation were different for you to cultivate and be with the cactus more in that way?
I would definitely feel different about it because I think that cultivation rights should have been given to Native American people a long time ago.
Danielle, you're the boss.
Yeah, I have a quick question. Cool. Sort of on the same point. My question is around the ability to cultivate peyote similarly to the way that you mentioned, where the goal is just to be able to cultivate and to appreciate that possibility. And is it possible to just do what you're saying, which is that if it's decriminalized, everybody should be doing it? Is there sort of a vision for what that could look like if you were to take that one step further now that it's a little bit more possible than it was at the time when this was filmed?
Sorry, so can I hand it back to you? What exactly is your question?
Yeah. So basically, what is the way? What is the step past what you said, where it would be great if everybody was doing this? What is your recommendation for now that it's possible? What would be your message to people who might be willing to participate in that movement?
That's a really difficult question simply because we have this state law in Texas, which happens to be the only state in the United States where peyote actually occurs naturally. It's an irony. So I don't have a good answer to your question, is the short.
So there's not a way to participate here in Oakland?
Oh, I think so. I think so. Okay, yes. And maybe Bia and I can respond to that in a better way, having thought about it more.
Yeah.
It shouldn't catch me off guard, but I don't want to tell you anything wrong.
I understand.
Yeah. Anything that can't stand up. And so let me give that some thought and come back to you. Please let me have your address or something.
Yes.
Okay.
I want to say that, I am in favor of cultivation and I am in favor of decriminalization. I also want to say that any project of decriminalization, regulation, legalization of peyote that doesn't come hand in hand with a project of conservation is a project of suicide for the species. So we have to hold that paradox. Okay? And I think it's also shouldn't rest on Native people to educate non-Native people about the problems of peyote conservation. We have a lot of resources to know that's happening, and it's not, to ask them to solve that problem for us, because obviously, when this existed in a smaller scale, that wasn't a problem. So the problem is that there's just more mouths wanting peyote than peyote's natural capacity to regrow. So that's a problem. And well, there's more to say, but let's have more people.
Hi, my name's George. I have been wearing this casting of a grandfather button for probably 50 years. I had peyote a few times when I was a young man, and firmly believe in its healing powers. I have a kind of a double question. First of all, would it be possible, I know cacti and succulents are pretty indestructible. Would it be possible to take the root of a peyote plant, slice it in half, up and down, kind of curl the edges around, maybe bind them a little, and replant, and then get a double plant that way? And my other question is, how does San Pedro compare to peyote in terms of mescaline content? Thank you.
Let me just address the first question, and Bia might address the second. The answer to your question is, it's really easy. And the bigger the plant that you start with, the easier it is, the less likelihood of any permanent damage to the plant. But basically, all you need to do is take the button, say it's that big, and literally, and assuming you've cut it off at the right level, okay? Assuming that you've only got green tissue that is photosynthesizing, okay? You're not down so far that you're into that brown root cover this part, just the green, soft, juicy part of the plant, the crown we call it. If as long as you take that, you could probably cut a good sized one into 4 pieces, and they'd all produce, or they could produce. They would at least grow. Let me put it that way. If you wanted them to be putting out pups, then you have to cut a little lower. And I don't advise doing that, because I like to leave the bulk of the plant, which is underground, in the ground, so that then it will produce pups from these little growth points called areoles that are not visible from the surface, but they are present as you go down the subterranean part of the stem of the plant, and they will produce pups. You don't have to do much at all. But if you're talking about just using that crown tissue, the top part, the nice green juicy part, you can make more than one cutting that will be viable, that will put down its own roots without risking killing the plant.
And regarding the San Pedro mescaline concentration?
San Pedro mescaline concentration. Just as a scientist who's looked at a bit of this, it's highly variable.
Yeah.
And it depends
In
on
both species?
Well, there's more than 2.
No, I mean both Lafafra and
I'm only talking about San Pedro now.
Okay, so they vary a lot.
Yeah, they vary enormously.
Are these pretty consistent?
Well, it's a function of age. The little tiny ones are going to have a lot lower concentration than the adults.
And do soil conditions affect the strength?
Now, that's a question for Trout.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right.
He's done a lot more of that than I have.
I think that the main question that people have was like, if peyote is a scarce resource and San Pedro has mescaline, why don't people just use San Pedro? And I think that's a totally valid question. But what can I say? I think unfortunately, this principle doesn't apply, In practical terms, sometimes that doesn't work, I'm gonna say a very silly analogy. You fall in love with somebody that lives in another town, and then you say, why don't you date somebody in your town? Well, I like that one, Some people have choices. They want to eat San Pedro. Some people want to eat peyote, and some will say, okay, those are equivalents. But from a spiritual point of view, from a traditional point of view, it's not equivalent. You know, it's different. So I think it's a naive solution, although I think it's important to push it, but it won't necessarily work. Then again, that's why I'm in favor of cultivation. And when you say it's a scarce resource, we went to the moon. We can do a lot of things. We can have the government of the United States of America make a program. Every little kid that is born get a peyote plant. And when you go to college, you're gonna have the peyote fund and your college fund. Like, let's be creative. Let's stop repeating this lie that this is hard. It's not hard. It's just that we didn't put our energy into that. We can create the Teslas, the this and that. Why can't we figure out the peyote solution? Because it's a moral problem. It's informed by the drug war, and it's related to our prejudiced views that this is minor stuff related to minor human beings that are indigenous people that are, if plants are on the lower scale, indigenous people are also put on the lower scale of humanity. They are not considered as human as non-indigenous people, which is very, very sad. After colonization, this is still a reality. Patricia and Dawn held an event yesterday in the Berkeley Museum where that was said. The starting point of everything is that Native peoples don't have the same views, their same rights as non-natives still, and peyote is associated to Native people, and so who cares? Who cares for plants and who cares for Native people? And so therefore, there's not a lot of policy and energy put into this, and plus you have a demonization that has a moral, religious, foundational piece to it, which is Christian, which associated the presence of peyote to the presence of devil. The early missionaries had philosophical, brilliant debates whether peyote was the devil itself or evidence that the devil had passed through that territory. They held debates to, anyway, I promised I was not going to speak a lot.
Hi. Yeah. So I wanted to say what I'm experiencing tonight is really moving me because I see something happening that is reflecting what's happening inside of me and many of my friends. It's like the meeting of the scientist and the philosopher or the spiritual. And I think what's really important is to amplify the voice of the native. And I personally have felt that very, very strongly, and I have such a deep craving to learn. And I think that's why this movement in Oakland is happening here, because there's so many people that are curious. They want to learn and they want to support. They understand the privilege to serve. And that's what I'm offering, and whatever I can do, that's my calling. I want to help. And I'm not even from America, I'm from Europe. And I just feel like there is so much important wisdom, and it's not just wanting to use a medicine that was, and abuse it. It's understanding what the land can teach us. So please, let us know, or let me know what I can do. Thank you now.
So the microphone can't reach back there. If you could please come up here, that'd be great.
Hi. I'm Fred Taylor.
Hi, Fred Taylor.
Hi, Fred Taylor. I'm an alcoholic. So I came over here because we're the Native American Church. I grew up in San Francisco. I was born in Oakland. I used this medicine when I was 17 down in Mexico. And then when I was around 40, 45, I started going to Native American Church. And I have Native blood, so I'm legal to use it. So my opinion about this plant is a little bit different. You know, for us, I'll speak for Native people, it's sacred. And I was talking to my friend, I talked to one Dene Navajo guy about coming up here because I don't want to have anything to do with it. He said, if it goes extinct, that's what God wants, you know. And I talked to him, you know, I go to these ceremonies, so I'm always learning things, you know. First medicine, water. It's the first medicine, most important one right there. He said you can have a ceremony without any drugs or medicine, just fire and water in itself. So I know how this medicine grows, I have it. And you know, the police came to my house and I said, you know, if you hassle me, I'm gonna sue you. And I'm gonna take it all the way up there to the Supreme Court. But like I told Don in that Facebook thing is, my friend over there, Cheyenne, and the first thing they ask is how we're related, you know, how our relation before they pray, right? Some people won't take anyone as a relation unless they really feel it, you know, but what she said, she had water and she said, Victor, before I say anything, what is our relation? Because he divorced and things had changed. He can't say auntie or uncle or brother-in-law because now he's not anymore. And he thought about it. I think the first thing you need to do is think about what you say, you know, especially around this medicine, water, fire, tobacco, all these different things. They're sacred. As sacred as our children. We have to take care of them, you know. That prayer, you know, like what you said, Dawn, I really respect that, you know, about protecting the peyote gardens. And if anyone here, you know, you want to use this medicine, don't put it in with the other categories of San Pedro, ayahuasca, anything like that. It's different. You know, it's for us, it's not a psychedelic drug, you know. I just came over here to hear what you had to say, you know. This medicine it's inside of me, you know. And my children, you know, I mean, I got 2 sons and they're both putting themselves through college. My prayer, you know, they're putting themselves through college on their own, full-time students and working, you know. How I pray this medicine, people get better from cancer, different things, how we use it, you know. It's not shamanism. It's not somebody puts on a robe and they say incarnation. It's a toolbox. It's a shield. This fireplace, what it is, this ceremony that we have, you know. We don't close it to anyone. You know, if white people or whoever want to come, it's open, you know. Even I told Trout, I said, you want to see it? Come on over, you know.
It's against the Native American Church.
So I just want to say that much. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to be a fool, but.
Do you have a question?
A question? Well, the one thing I want to know is how when Oakland made this law, and I've seen it on the webcast and everything, how did they group peyote and mushrooms and ayahuasca all, and San Pedro is legal, how did they group all those into one? I mean, whose idea was it to do that? And the reason I'm saying that is this medicine is sacred to us. We don't own it. You know, I mean, everybody breathes the same air, we all walk the same earth, we all have similar desires and everything, but how can you put that together in a plant that, like I said, I go to these ceremonies, I know what's going on, I don't know the dealers, I've been there where it grows, I know the people who get it and everything, it's really diminishing big time, you know. So when they made that law, it kind of made me more scared that this medicine is going to disappear. And someone over here, they saw I had all this green medicine. They said, "Can I get it?" And I said, "Yeah." And then I thought about it, and I was like, "You're non-native, man. I can't do that. That's not right, I mean, we can't do that." And so, I mean, that's going back to that water woman. Her name is Elena Turtle. She was over there, and she said, "Victor, the roadman, if you see somebody acting up or abusing this, you got to stand up and say something, When the police came to my house, those guys are saying, you can't let the police treat you like that, I mean, that's the first time I ever really felt prejudice in my life, because I could have the right to have it and they wanted to take it. That's the first time, my brother over here, he's full-blooded Navajo, he might have a different opinion, but that's the first time. It really hurt. It really turned me inside out, upside down. So I just wanted to say that. But anyway, how can you put peyote and San Pedro and mushrooms and all that into one? How can you do that?
It's a very good question, and I propose that some of the colleagues of maybe Decriminalize Nature Oakland speak, but I would also love to hear you if you want to share your words. And I, really appreciate you guys showing up, and I already feel this event is worth it because of that.
Hi, my name is Gary Dene. I grew up on a reservation, and that's all I knew was these different ceremonies. And our hearts and everything was tied to it. Just like anybody would be tied to their work, their kids. This was something that was our haven, or something where we were just by talking about it, it's bringing me tears right now. What's going on right now? I drove all the way from in traffic over here, and I need to come over here to hear this. And this is what I see now. It used to be all on the reservation, it never got out. I thought it never got out, and it's slowly getting out. And all I could say is just take care of it. Use your best judgment. That's all we're overwhelmed. We got this group, now we another group that were out there, and just go around and say, hey, that's not the way to treat this thing. Be a good steward, because we can't be anywhere, we can't be everywhere. Just like the day one, when this became a government, United States government, we've been fighting with it. And all we need is some help. And if you want to use it, just say, hey, where can I use it? Go to the meetings. Go legally get your paperwork. Do that so it weeds out people that just wants to get high. And when you get high on this thing for pleasure, it's going to affect you different ways, let me tell you. You're not going to think right. It has to be done right by the Creator and the spirits, whoever you pray to. So that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I want to stand in front of you. Okay. My name is Carlos Lazola. I'm the owner of the building. Welcome. This is the Haven. And also the one of the co-founders of Decriminalized Nature. I guess the question was, I was outside actually, somebody just informed me, was why did we include all of the plants that we did in Decriminalized Nature? Was that the question? Yes. Okay. Oh, well, basically it was all plants on Schedule 1 and plants and fungi on Schedule 1. federal Schedule 1 list. And the basic gist is this: there's a lot of conversations about cultural use and all of that, and agree with all of it about being having reverence and giving respect and recognizing cultural use, cultural history. But fundamentally, our relationship as humans, is our philosophy, our relationship as humans to nature should never have a government intervention between it. Bottom line. So it's not that we want greater restrictions for reservations, it's that nobody should have restrictions in their relationship with nature, period. And we'll work with anybody to achieve that for all humans. Thank you.
Hi again. So my name's Kira, and yeah, I was the one that asked on that question before. So I am an ecologist, amongst other things, and I work in restoration ecology. And we've been talking a lot about strategies for keeping this plant going, whether it's planting, cultivating, reducing human consumption. But from a big picture standpoint, it's about not just the plant itself, but it's kind of like the star of the stage, but it's really the desert that it's in. And so I get excited about conservation of some of these species that people get really, psyched about because they've got these tremendous benefits for human beings, but they've also have this opportunity to point us in the direction of taking better care of the land in general. So what do you all know about in terms of opportunities to work with land trusts or do things like rematriate the land, which is something that's happening here in Oakland? If you guys don't know, we're on traditional Ohlone territory, and there is an organization here in this area that is working to return the land to the control of Indigenous people. And I would like to see opportunities to funnel resources into doing that on the ground in the places that these plants grow. So do you know anything about existing land trusts or ways that we can be protecting large swaths of land? Don, you mentioned that you're doing some work with mapping and figuring out like the best potential habitat, but that seems to me to be a great way that we can be, rather than just like piecemeal, not everybody can grow a plant or do that, and not everybody has, direct access, whether you're a native person or not. Like this medicine is traveling. So if it's coming from a distance, how from a distance can we be contributing to the protection of the plant and the desert? What do you know?
One way of approaching that question is what we need to look at what already exists, and I do my little part through a 501c3 of which I'm chairman of the board. It's called the Cactus Conservation Institute, Inc. And you can find it on the web. Just type in Cactus Conservation Institute, and it'll show you what we're up to. There are other organizations that maybe have a broader focus than that. Even the Nature Conservancy, they do their part to preserve habitat of whatever they're interested in, and in sort of southern Texas, that would have to include peyote.
There's currently the Indigenous Peyote Conservation Initiative. I am saddened that Miriam Volat could not make it. She has a family situation, but they are doing wonderful work in Texas. And I think another dimension that is a possibility would be, as Don advocates, to have a more proactive interaction between government and landowners in Texas. You could have incentives, for example, for landowners that work with this topic of peyote, give them tax exemptions, and even if they're gonna go root plotting, have people come in and take peyote beforehand. But I think the main problem is the model of development. And then it's just gonna escalate huge to capitalism and to our predation relationship to nature, which is grounded on this anthropocentric view that we are superior to nature and nature is an object for us. So, there's only certain damage that individual pickers can go and make, but if you compare that to like huge development projects, it's the same thing with the Amazon. You can have a lot of Amazon tourists, ayahuasca tourists harvesting ayahuasca, but every second there is like thousands of hectares being burnt down in the Amazon, and that takes a lot of vines. So the problem is our models of development. That's the ultimate problem of, I think, all relationship to nature. And I don't want to dismiss the intentional bad practice of harvesting, because one thing is a general destruction and the other one is a focused one. So that's kind of different as well, and that involves a kind of intentionality that is different, something to consider.
I think it's also important too to recognize that Texas is 95% privately owned. So the remaining population, of that 5% remaining population, I think 2% is the Big Bend National Park. So that really puts most likely, highly likely, that 100% of this peyote population resides under private ownership. So you're dealing with private owners. It's not like, larger states like California and Idaho where there's large public land, large, pieces of BLM land. It's a completely different category of land ownership that dates back to Spanish Inquisition.
Hello everybody, my name is Aikuti and Viradica, Angelica Valadez in Spanish. First, I would like to express my gratitude for you guys and following that dream of studying peyote, learning, and you, Bia, I think you've had incredible seminars. I don't talk at them, but I brought elders, and I think it's so important that every aspect is shared with the world. And I just want to let you know that, speaking of the world, my mom, Susana Valadez, the Wirarica tribe, and the Peyote were Nobel Peace nominated for 2019. So there is a bigger consciousness about the endangered plant of hikuri, which is peyote. And although we didn't win, I am so grateful to the Drugs and Peace Institute for doing this, because this is to create an awareness. And I'm going to tell you something that I think is very important to share. I'm very grateful for the words of the elders and your dedication. And when they're here, we should always listen. But right now, my realization with the fire in Brazil was that, Brazil, the indigenous people won, and they lit their forest on fire. It's all on fire, This affects our world. As the Wirarica, the reason we got this nomination is because of the mining companies. They wanna mine our sacred land, and they want to get gold and silver, and that's where our deities live. And that is also the land of the peyote, and they also want to get uranium, and they poison the water, and they don't care about the plants. They don't care about the world. They don't care about humans, and they're big monsters. And as a person that lives in a tribe and is half Wirarica, an American, and always has to prove herself, but also has to do the right thing and do the right calling and say, okay, I am traditional, but also like peyote is so significant. And I see, because I work with the elders and the head chief and the one that was representing the peyote with the Native American church, Marcelino Avila Robles El Gallo. He went with Wican, they call him, Sando Wican, and they all protected, and they got this protection for the peyote lands. But somebody did a fake nonprofit and they want to take what protects it. But you know what? Our president of Mexico said, oh, we're not going to have new concessions, but the ones there can stay. So if you know Wirikuta, then there's this town named Charcas, and you could go all the way from Charcas all the way to Wirikuta to your sacred land, and we're on fire. The peyote's on fire, and that's the reality. So that's what I want to share with you. The other thing is, well, not just us, the Wirarica, a lot of indigenous people are in danger, so we gotta wake up. We gotta wake up about the kids. And the reality is that these plants bring healing, and that should not just be limited to us. We gotta break down the walls. We're not fucking Trump. Sorry, I used that word. But break down those walls. We gotta break them down, you know? We gotta get the kids. What's gonna heal the kids? You know, these are kids, so, okay, so we gotta see what the medicine can heal, because it can't just heal physical things, it can heal spiritual things, and it's also a sacrament. So there's so much protection. And that is just a very small thing I had to say. I think I just felt in my heart that I had to share it with you. And thank you very much, and thank you guys.
I am from the other south of the border, and you know, I also think that, you know, these borders are fiction. The plants and the people, we all belong to the land. Wanted to call my friend Kat, wanted to make a question. You had to come here.
Can I just do this?
No, come here. It's part of the initiation.
My question is as much for all of you as for us in the collective that probably can't be solved tonight, but going back to what Carlos shared and what you shared, I'm curious, as the decriminalized nature movement is gaining a lot of momentum, what would it take to take that strategy and the resources and the momentum and also turn that towards the prohibition and the structures, the governmental structures that are in place that also limit Native peoples in ways that you'd like to see change, so there is more of this equity and equanimity between all of us in addressing this. So.
So that's a really hard question to answer. Very, very hard, especially under this current administration, because for what's going to have to happen for Indigenous people to have more rights is there's going to have to be a test case that's going to have to go to the Supreme Court. That's what it's going to take. And I definitely don't want to be the person to be that test case person. No way. And I mean, look at what happened with the Native men who did it back in the 70s. You know, they were put in jail. Peyote ceremonies went underground. You know, I mean, when peyote was brought to our reservation, historical records say that peyote was brought to my reservation in 1918, which I do not believe is true. I believe that it was brought to our reservation much earlier than that because of my tribe's relation with Comanches. We're distantly related, we share the same language. And so to say that peyote came to our reservation in 1918 was just a protective tactic by my tribe so that our ceremonies weren't being invaded prior to that. But I believe it was definitely on our reservation much earlier and in our territory much earlier than that. And so to have these policies changed would take a Supreme Court action. And at this point, especially under this administration, I don't think that that's going to happen as quickly for us as it did for the city of Oakland. A test case means that, so back in the 70s, it took a man willing to say, I'm going to take peyote from Texas and I'm going to purposely get arrested so that they can catch me and arrest me with my medicine. And because I've been arrested with this medicine, I know I'm going to have to go to court. And so that became the test case for the beginning of the American Indian Religious Freedom Act.
I want to just acknowledge the presence here of my friend, Dr. Monica Williams. Can you just stand up here? Monica is the chair of our board in Chacruna, and she's a mentor to me. So we held an event in CIIS in August last year, and somebody said the N-word. And we were called out, and that was a very painful situation. And I looked Monica up, and you know, she helped me navigate it. And I ended up inviting her to drink ayahuasca with me, so that was a good thing for our friendship. And there she is now, who kind of, you know, a little bit brainwashed. No, just kidding. We're trying to advance, you know, the racial Equity and Access Committee in Chacruna. And so we are about empowering women of color, Indigenous people, queer people, people from the global south in the field of psychedelic science. That's our main mission. And I want to invite everybody to come to our panel in Bioneers. That's why we are all here, and this is another side event. And so that's going to be Saturday in Bioneers. And also want to invite people to join our conference, Psychedelic Liberty Summit. That's going to be in April in the Brava Theater Center. You can go to our site, chacruna.net, and see the information. So the conference is about law, culture, and politics in the psychedelic renaissance, exploring decriminalization, medicalization, legalization, commodification, and access. And we're going to give a big prominence to the topic of peyote, because peyote is the native sacrament of this land. And we don't need to fetishize native people from South America and drink ayahuasca with the latest shaman. We have native people right here that need our help. And so I want to invite all of you. And also on that night, I met my friend. You had did you want to make a comment, question? You had your...
Before I did, but it's
not anymore?
It's a long, long road with that.
I want to invite you to come up here and say your piece, because I spotted you, and you know, I'm curious to know what you think about everything. And we're going to end with your comment or question, whatever you decide to close it up.
Hi everyone, it's wonderful sharing space with everybody. Thank you very much for what you've presented. It's been eye-opening. My name is Duchess, aka the Dank Duchess. I am a hash maker. So I am within the cannabis community as a hash maker and educator. And a big focus about, I moved over here 5 years ago from not a repressive situation, but I definitely lived in the South. Whole situation of what you should be like, whatever, and I came out here because of believing in what cannabis can do. I was growing for 10 years in Florida, came out here to be able to grow on the outside. My big thing about being over here, especially as a woman of color, is there often is a bit of a disconnect with, how can I say, ooh, this is so long. There's a bit of a disconnect with what's considered medicine, what's considered God, what's considered spiritual. I mean, there's a lot of that I find that I'm in a different space because I'm not a Christian, because I do see cannabis as part of my sacred medicine. But cannabis is one of the things. I love mushrooms and all kinds of other things. And so I have an issue. Now, that issue is a little bit rough. What I was going to ask is, what is the ownership on God? I see that there can be a lot of, or what is the ownership on a spiritual practice? And that can be a lot of things. Like, no one wants to be dealing with cultural appropriation, but at the same time, it gets us to understanding God better. And you could be ayahuasca, you're saying, oh, don't fetishize Native. I'm from Panama, I'm first generation American, and we're Native. My mom's side of the family, we're Salamanca Native. Ayahuasca in South America is going to be different than peyote here. So the idea of like, let's not fetishize the Native Americans, we have our own Native Americans here, but everyone has their own individual ways that they find God or they find their spiritual practice. And who sets ownership on that? And and at what point do you say, well, this is your God, and I don't want to like walk over to your God, and this is this other person's God? Who owns that? So that's a lot of time package. So I was just kind of like, maybe later we'll have that
I don't have a smart thing to say right now. I want to pass to you two to say whatever you want to say as a closing note for our evening. And I just also want to, once again thank our friends of the San Francisco Psychedelic Society. A big clap for them, please. I want to thank Peyote, and I want to thank Martin and Deidre for coming, and Dawn as well. And I want to pass the mic. And
okay, I'll leave you with one new thought, and that is that there is this new organization which goes by IPCI, which is Indigenous Peyote Conservation Initiative. They bought 605 acres down in the southern part of Texas in prime peyote habitat. And the idea is, of course, to do something towards, the board of directors, by the way, is about half Native American, half lawyers. Not necessarily the same people. But anyway, just watch that space. Watch to see what they do. I think it's going to be good.
There's a lot of things I guess I would want to end with. And with saying that, I lost my train of thought. I guess one of the things that I always like to say when I do presentations like this is that I don't speak on behalf of all Indian people. I want to make that very clear. I only speak on behalf of myself. And even though I'm a member of a tribe, I am also a member of the church. I'm not a card-carrying member, but I'm a member nonetheless. And I don't even speak on behalf of them. I won't even speak on behalf of my husband. So I want to make that very clear, because sometimes words, when they're said in circles like this, they get misconstrued and they get, people interpret things differently. So I don't want my words to be associated with my tribe or my church or anything like that. But I do want to leave you with that thought. If people are partaking in peyote, because I don't encourage non-Indigenous use. I don't. That's not a part of who I am or a part of my research. Because peyote is in decline, and peyote is a protected medicine for federally recognized tribal members, I think it's important that you all be mindful of that. And that I know there's a lot of discussion, just like the Duchess just said just now, that who owns that, I know I don't, but it's important that we recognize that peyote is a protected plant for Native American people. It's important that you remember that. Maybe we should have made a stamp so that when you all left here, we could stamp it on your hands or something. But just to be mindful that, it is a protected plant. And this idea of decriminalization, it's a very sensitive topic. I reached out to Carlos Plazola and to Bob Stanley. I'm not sure if Bob is still here. And we had this awkward conversation about why Indian people weren't brought to the table when they made this discussion about entheogens. Because I read an article, I don't know if it came from the Oakland Times or what article I read exactly, but I read it the day that it came out, and the very next day I was writing a letter to the Oakland City Council and making comments on Facebook and social media, which is where I was put in touch with Bob and Carlos. And we had that awkward conversation about, and I instinctively knew when I read that article, I knew Indian people, Native American people were not consulted when I read that peyote was included as an entheogen. I instantly knew. I didn't have to reach out to the Native American church to ask them directly because I already knew. I did eventually, just to clarify, hey, did you guys get this call to the table? And of course, we weren't there. And so I always try to advocate for that. I advocate that whenever there are Indigenous topics being discussed, that you invite those Indians to the table. You invite your local Ohlonies. You invite the Native American church. You invite those Indigenous people. Not that they speak on behalf of everybody, of course, because we don't all speak for our people that way. At least I don't, and I make that very clear that I don't. But that we are included. We're included in those conversations. That we have those conversations with when it's involving Indigenous topics, because we haven't had those topics. That's why we're in the position that we are right now. And peyote is going to continue to remain in decline. And I believe that decriminalization has potential to impact those wild populations. And so that is very worrisome for me and for most likely most Native American people who are partaking in this medicine. So thank you all for coming. And I want to thank my friends Sherry and Neil for coming all the way from Sacramento.
Comment, I just also want to acknowledge the presence of Deidre here. Deidre, do you think you can stand up to receive a full applause from everybody?
I'll try. Let me hand over things.
So, Deidre and Martin have a fantastic love story, which will be, the hook for the next Chacruna event. I'm not going to tell the whole story. But I just want to say that I think, Martin's love for peyote is part of what made also Deidre love him, and it's definitely part of what makes me love him. And so, thank you for your friendship, and thank you for all your work.